In the sandstone escarpments of Cape York, in the far north of Australia, there is rock art that is thousands of years old, painted by the Aboriginal peoples of that country. Among the figures on those walls are the Quinkans, spirit beings from the stories of the land, long-limbed and strange, some mischievous. And when, in the 20th century, scientists uncovered the fossilized remains of a real monster that had once hunted that very country, a crocodile unlike any alive today, they reached for those stories, and they named it after the spirits. They called it Quinkana. There is something profound in that choice. A real animal named for the imagined monsters of the same land, as if the people who painted those walls had left a space in their mythology that a true creature, long dead, turned out to fit. It is a fitting name, because this animal was, in the most literal sense, a monster the first Australians could have met, and it was a creature that breaks nearly everything you think you know about what a crocodile is. When you picture a crocodile, you picture water. You picture an ambush, a pair of eyes at the surface, a lunge, a death roll, a body dragged under and drowned. You picture cone-shaped teeth, built to grip and hold. Quinkana had almost none of that. And the single piece of hard evidence that tells us so, the one thing about this animal that is beyond any dispute, is hiding in its teeth. This is the story of how we were wrong about crocodiles, and of the strange, secret history the modern crocodile has been quietly hiding from us all along. Let's start with the certainty, because with an animal this fragmentary, certainty is precious, and Quinkana's teeth are as certain as it gets. If you took the tooth of a saltwater crocodile, the great river ambusher of northern Australia today, you would find it rounded and conical, a thick, sturdy peg. That shape is not an accident. It is a tool for a specific job. A modern crocodile does not chew, and it does not slice. It seizes, and it holds, and it drowns. Its cone-shaped teeth are built to grip a struggling animal without letting go, to pin it and pull it under the water where the crocodile has every advantage and the prey has none. The tooth is a clamp, and the whole strategy behind it is patience and water and overwhelming force applied in the one place a crocodile can never lose. Now look at the tooth of Quinkana, and you are looking at something else entirely. Its teeth were what paleontologists call ziphodont, flattened from side to side, curved backward like a hook, and most tellingly of all, edged with fine serrations, like the blade of a steak knife. This is not the tooth of an animal that grips and holds. It is the tooth of an animal that cuts. Run a fingertip along the edge of a serration, and you understand its purpose instantly. It is a saw, a blade meant to be drawn across flesh and part it, to slice through muscle and hide, and open a wound that will not close. Those serrated blade-like teeth are in fact remarkably similar to the teeth of the great predatory dinosaurs, arrived at along a completely separate path, and they are found on no crocodile living anywhere on Earth today. And a cutting tooth tells you something a gripping tooth cannot. It tells you this animal was not built to drag prey underwater and drown it. It was built to slash, to open a wound with a single raking bite and let the prey bleed, to kill on land, where drowning is not an option and cutting is everything. You do not evolve a mouthful of serrated blades to hunt in the water. You evolve it to hunt out of it. Every serration is a small argument against the water, the signature of a predator that expected to meet its prey somewhere the drowning trick would not work. The teeth alone, before we know anything else, tell us that this crocodile had walked away from the water's edge and gone looking for a different life. The only question is how far it went, and that is where the certainty ends, and the honesty has to begin. Because here is what we do not know about Quinkana, and it is a great deal. Almost everything we have of this animal is skull and teeth. Of the rest of its body, the parts that would actually tell us how it lived and moved, we have very little. Its limb bones, its proportions, the length of its legs, the things you would need to know whether it truly ran, are largely a blank. This is the frustrating reality of a great deal of paleontology, and it is worth being honest about. Teeth and skull bone are hard and durable and tend to survive, while the more delicate bones of the limbs are scattered, gnawed, and lost. So we are often left knowing an animal's mouth intimately and its body barely at all. And this matters enormously, because the most exciting claim you will hear about Quinkana, the one that probably brought you here, is that it was a galloping land predator that chased its prey across open country and ran it down like a hound. And the honest truth is that we do not know that, and the evidence for it is thin. That picture was built partly by extrapolation from Quinkana's relatives, some of which do appear to have been more terrestrial, rather than from Quinkana's own bones, which barely exist. And when researchers went back and re-examined the case for a fully terrestrial, running Quinkana, among them the paleontologist Stephen Rowe, they found it surprisingly weak. Many of its fossils turn up in ancient river deposits, near water, which would fit an animal that still spent a good deal of its life in and around rivers, not one that had abandoned them for the open plain. The same uncertainty haunts its size. The estimates range widely, from smaller, older forms perhaps 2 meters long, up to the largest Quinkana forterostrum, at maybe 5 or 6 meters. And you will sometimes see a figure as large as 9 meters quoted, along with weights of a couple of 100 kilograms. But those upper numbers are widely regarded as overestimates, stretched from fragments, the same way the true size of Megalania has been argued over for a century. What is reasonably clear is that the largest Quinkana was a big, heavy, genuinely dangerous animal on the scale of a large modern crocodile, and that the truly monstrous figures should be treated with caution. So we have to hold two things at once, and this is exactly the kind of honesty that separates a real story from a fabricated one. We know, for certain, from the teeth, that this was a crocodile that had rebuilt its weapons for cutting flesh rather than drowning prey. A predator doing something no living crocodile does. And we do not know, not really, how terrestrial it was, how big it got, or whether it walked, waded, or ran. It is a monster we can half see, a shape looming out of deep time with its blades intact and its legs lost to the record, a mouth without a body, a weapon without a clear picture of the hand that wielded it. And rather than invent the missing half, the far more interesting move is to ask the question the teeth actually pose. Why would a crocodile become a cutter of flesh on land at all? Because it turns out Quinkana was not a one-off freak. It was the last chapter of a story that had been repeating, quietly, for a very long time. This is the part almost nobody knows, and it is the heart of why we have been wrong about crocodiles. We think of the crocodile as the ultimate conservative, the animal that found one perfect design, the water ambush, and then simply stopped, holding that single successful form unchanged for tens of millions of years, while the rest of the world churned around it. It is one of the most repeated facts in all of nature writing. The crocodile as living fossil, the animal time forgot. And that is true of the lineage that survives today. But it is only half the truth, because the crocodile family, across its long history, did not only sit in rivers. Again and again, in different times and on different continents, crocodiles and their close relatives experimented with leaving the water and becoming predators of the land. Long before Quinkana, in South America, there were the cebechids, crocodile relatives that stood on longer legs and carried the same kind of flattened, serrated ziphodont teeth. True terrestrial hunters that stalked the continent for ages after the great dinosaurs were gone, filling the role of top land predator with a crocodilian body. For millions of years on that isolated southern continent, it was not a big cat or a wolf sitting at the top of the food chain, but a long-legged, land-going crocodile relative with a mouth full of blades, running down its prey where nothing else could challenge it. The blueprint Quinkana was working from was not new. The land predator crocodile is a thing evolution has reached for over and over, a recurring experiment in what a crocodile could be if it turned its back on the river. And it makes a certain sense that they kept trying, because the crocodilian body already carries most of what a land predator needs: armor, a devastating jaw, powerful limbs, and a patient, ambush-hunting instinct. Whenever a landscape opened a vacancy at the top of the food chain, with no big cats or wolves or bears to fill it, a crocodile was often standing nearby, ready to walk inland and take the job. And nowhere did that experiment run longer or stranger in isolation than in Australia. Because Australia, cut off from the rest of the world, grew its own private dynasty of crocodiles, a whole family called the mekosuchines, found across the continent and out into the islands of the Pacific, and found nowhere else on Earth. For tens of millions of years, these homegrown crocodiles diversified into forms the modern world has entirely forgotten. This is one of the great untold stories of Australian natural history, a continent's worth of crocodiles evolving in isolation for longer than there have been apes on Earth, and almost none of them resembling the animal the word crocodile brings to mind. Some were small, a meter or less, agile things that may have climbed and hunted in the forests. Some kept to the water, and some grew large and armed themselves with cutting teeth and moved toward a life on land. Some of the smaller members of this family outlasted Quinkana by a wide margin, clinging on across the islands of the Pacific, on places like New Caledonia, Fiji, and Vanuatu, until only a few thousand years ago, when the first people reached those islands and the last of the strange little crocodiles vanished with them. This was an entire lost radiation of crocodiles, an Australian experiment in crocodileness running in parallel to everything else on the continent, and it produced, at its apex, its largest and most formidable member, Quinkana. Quinkana was not a strange accident. It was the giant capstone of a secret dynasty, the biggest and most powerful expression of a uniquely Australian idea about what a crocodile could become. And that reframes the animal completely. Set it back in its world, the Australia of the Ice Age, the same lost continent of giants we have visited before on this channel, and Quinkana takes its place among the apex predators of that vanished land. It shared its country with the marsupial lion dropping from the trees, and with Megalania, the giant monitor lizard, and it hunted the same colossal prey they did, another completely different kind of killer, in a continent that seemed to specialize in producing them. Where the marsupial lion killed with a crushing bite and grappling claws, and Megalania with venom and patience, Quinkana killed with blades, a third utterly distinct answer to the same problem of bringing down a giant. Picture it not galloping across a plain like a greyhound, which we cannot support, but as something arguably stranger and better evidenced, a large, powerful, armored predator with a mouth full of serrated blades, moving along the margins of rivers and woodlands, capable of coming out of the water and onto the land in a way no crocodile does today, and dealing death not by drowning but by cutting. An animal you could not escape by getting out of the water, because the water was not where the danger ended. That single idea is what makes Quinkana so unsettling even now. It removes the one piece of instinctive knowledge every animal, ourselves included, carries about crocodiles, that once you are on dry land, you are safe. For a while, in Australia, you were not. For millions of years, this Australian dynasty of crocodiles held its ground, and Quinkana was its final, greatest form. And then it ended. Quinkana disappears from the record around 40,000 years ago, in the same narrow window that swallowed the marsupial lion, the giant lizard, and nearly all the great Australian megafauna, the same window in which the first humans arrived on the continent. For tens of millions of years, the mekosuchine dynasty had held on through everything the continent's shifting climate could throw at it. And then, in a geological instant, at the very end, it was gone. What exactly drove it under is part of the same fierce debate that surrounds all of that lost fauna, a tangle of changing climate, shifting landscapes, and the arrival of a new and capable predator. And honesty requires admitting we cannot cleanly separate the causes. But the outcome is not in doubt. The last great terrestrial crocodile of Australia went out with the rest of the giants, and the long, strange experiment of the land-hunting crocodile, which had run for tens of millions of years across half the world, quietly came to an end. Nothing has taken its place since. There is no crocodile on Earth today that hunts the way Quinkana's teeth say it did, and there has not been for 40,000 years. So here is how we were wrong about crocodiles, and it is worth saying plainly, because it inverts the thing everyone believes. We treat the crocodile as evolution's great changeless survivor, the animal that got it right the first time and never had to try anything else, a living fossil that has been the same since before the dinosaurs fell. And that is a real and remarkable story. But it is only one of the crocodile's two stories, and we forgot the other one. Because the crocodile lineage was also a restless experimenter, a shapeshifter that kept testing the boundaries of its own body plan, kept climbing out of the water and reaching for the land, kept reinventing itself as a runner, a cutter, a terrestrial hunter, over and over, on continent after continent, for most of its immense history. The crocodile body plan turns out to be far more versatile and far more restless than its single surviving form would ever lead you to believe. The river ambusher we know is not the whole crocodile. It is the one version that happened to survive. Survival has a way of erasing the alternatives, of making the winner look inevitable, as though it had always been the only possibility, when in truth it was one branch among many that simply outlasted the rest. And in Australia, that other, bolder crocodile came closest of all to a life on land, and it left us the proof in a set of serrated teeth and a name borrowed from the spirits of the country it hunted. Quinkana is the reason we have to hold both ideas at once, that the crocodile is at once the most conservative animal in the world and one of its most secretly adventurous, an unchanging survivor haunted by all the other things it once tried to be. The fossil record is full of these forgotten crocodiles, and every one of them is a road the lineage tried and then abandoned, or was forced off of, until only the river remained. And of those two crocodiles, only one is still here. The experimenters are all gone. The cebechids of South America, the mekosuchines of Australia, Quinkana and its whole lost dynasty, every crocodile that ever tried to conquer the land, vanished. What remains is the other one, the conservative, the river king that never left the water and never needed to, the single design so perfect that it has come through every catastrophe the planet could throw at it, unchanged, for longer than almost anything alive. It watched the dinosaurs die. It watched the megafauna rise and fall. It is still out there right now, in the rivers of northern Australia, waiting exactly as it has waited for 100 million years. We have spent this whole story on the crocodile that dared to change and paid for it with extinction. The crocodile that refused to change, and by refusing became one of the greatest survivors in the history of life on Earth, is a mystery of a completely different kind. How does an animal survive not for a few million years, but for 100 million, coming through the extinction that killed the dinosaurs and the one that erased the megafauna, and emerge on the other side essentially unchanged and still on top? That is exactly where we are going next.